Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the team of the Boima Institute and the Freedom Games, I wanted to tell you that we are very happy that you decided to take part in the panel Chinese Century in Asia. What kind of Asian policy does Poland need? This topic has been selected due to the response by Boima Institute when we were talking about the policy taken towards Asian policy. The next stage of these actions was the meeting of the round table participated by some 30 Poles operating in Asia, and together we were considering how Poland should face challenges in terms of Asian operation, and also how what Polish policy towards Asian states should look like. And we have passed a report recently. You can find it on our website. This debate is in line with these questions concerning Polish policy towards Asia. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. 5 panelists have accepted this invitation, and now I would like to ask you to introduce yourselves. So we have some 60 minutes. Everybody has 60 seconds to introduce themselves. And first, I would like to ask Dr. Agnieszka Legucka to introduce herself. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, Agnieszka Legucka. I work in an institute of Eastern Europe. I also deal with this program, and I would like to encourage you to take part in the discussion. I hope that the Russian perspective will also be included in the topic of Asia. Now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Joanna Klikowska-Ciesielska to introduce herself. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joanna Klikowska-Ciesielska. I am a scientist in politics. I work at the Department of Asian Studies at the University of Łódź. This is a think tank. In my studies, I mainly address foreign policy of Germany in the European context, but also international context. And I mainly deal with the relations relations between Germany and China in Europe. Now I would like to give the floor to Professor Adam Jelonek to introduce himself. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Jelonek. I'm the director of the Institute of the Middle and Far East of the Jagiellonian University. I used to be an ambassador in Brunei, and now I am a member of the Council of Polish Republic Ambassadors. And Professor Tomasz Kamiński, I'm a professor at the Department of Asian Studies of the University of Łódź. I specialize in European and Chinese relations, and I've been looking at the para-diplomatic relations between European regions with China. And Dr. Krzysztof Zalewski. Good evening. Krzysztof Zalewski. I'm chair of the Council of the Boim Institute Foundation. I am the author of different publications by our foundations. I mainly write about India, about the foreign relations and digital transformation in India. And now I would like to introduce myself. My name is Patrycja Pendrakowska. I'm the chair of the president of the Boim Institute. And now let's discuss the main topic. The first question is for Dr. Krzysztof Zalewski, how to build Polish policy community that is to review the policy towards Asia and to modify the existing strategy. Thank you very much for this question. It's an easy one, so I will need 30 seconds to answer it. But seriously speaking, I'm unable to tell you exactly what kind of policy this should be. I would like to say why we need this policy and how we could develop this policy. I am sure that Poland needs a smart pivot towards Asia. Pivot is in basketball. This is when a player has one foot on the ground and she is just extending her maneuver. So for us, we need to be rooted in NATO and the European Union, but we need to make a pivot toward Asia. We have to have new economic and social opportunities. We need this pivot because of three complex factors. Firstly, the global growth of the importance of this region in improving security in the region. I mean the situation between India, Pakistan, the complicated situation on Chińskie Sea, and the US and China conflict. And thirdly, we need to change the Polish policy towards Asia because it is due to the involvement of China in the engagement in Europe. So we have to address the international role that has been developed by our European Union partners, and our role is to adapt and to find some gaps on the Asian markets for our exporters and to find capital investments to develop infrastructure. But the United States and the European Union states are changing their strategies towards Asia. And our voice in these changes has to be heard. Even the chain of supply is being transformed, and the shape of these relations will depend on the current situation, that is pandemic, and interdependencies that has been revealed by the pandemic, and also it will be due to the political decisions of our partners and allies. We need to redefine where our Polish experience can contribute a difference in Asia. We should also consider the ways of impacting the EU and the United States policy towards relations with Asian countries. Boehm Institute is not the first body that is talking about pivot towards Asia. So I will be keeping to this basketball metaphor. I would like to emphasize that basketball is a team game. So the policy towards Asia is not a challenge for one think tank as ours, one state or one government. It requires many stakeholders, and the assumptions should be elaborated by think tanks, by diplomats in consultation with business, Poles who live in Asia, different religious associations, and scientists. During these consultations, we need to develop Polish policy community to have a discussion. This team should start the pivot in Asia. It should recommend changes on the ongoing basis. It should be characterized by consultative involvement. Many stakeholders should be involved in the elaboration of the rules of this policy. Many cities, regions, and government centers should be involved. Also, it should have a multidisciplinary nature, so both science, security, and politics should be involved. And at the operational level, this policy should have clear objectives and sound reallocation of resources. Sometimes it causes problems. In my opinion, this debate, as you have said, Patricia, can be a part of the pivot towards Asia, pivot understood as our policy and our activities in Asia. Thank you. Thank you, Krzysztof. Now I would like to ask a question to Professor Adam Jelonek. Which changes would you introduce in the current policy of Poland towards Asia? I could answer this question in 15 seconds, or maybe I would need many hours. We've never had a policy towards Asia, and now this policy is non-existing at all. In 2017, a strategic document was developed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was a document on on Poland's foreign policy, and this document this document contains only 7 references towards Asia. This is not surprising. This is not anything unique. I have been working on many documents developed by many governments, and I was to plan objectives for Poland in terms of this policy. So there were different feedbacks, different inputs, but in most cases, this feedback was not very tangible. I was very much for elaborating Polish strategy concerning the impact in these states. Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been working with me for many years. And I must say that Poland really needs a good strategy of Polish foreign policy that wouldn't be just a strategy developed in 2017. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are calling it a amelioration strategy, where we are going just to make this strategy deeper and narrower. In this strategy, we have identified at least 2 strategic areas. It's the axis, transatlantic axis, and the EU axis. If we were able to keep these 2 strategies, then we have to be honest. Then, by implementing this strategy based on the strategy of security, demarked by the transatlantic axis. On the other hand, we've got the strategy of economic development in the European Union. So if we follow this, we wouldn't need a political strategy towards Asia, because then, based on these 2 strategic objectives, we will be able to deliver objectives that are important to Poland. Foreign policy towards Asia only once has been demonstrated as the key reference point, or very important reference point. So it happened when I stopped believing that the strategy should be developed. There was an idea not so long ago, 6 years ago. So the author was one of my colleagues. I'm not going to mention any names, but somebody from the president's office. So he was promoting a version where there would be many axes of Poland's foreign policy. So it was emphasized that Asia, of course, we have to say China. So there was this idea that we are able to build some peripheral structures that will result in the situation where Poland finally will become an independent entity of international policy. At the time, I took part in one of the consultation meetings. Representatives of the Minister of Foreign Affairs took part in that meeting, and I heard something that has really frightened me. It was the time of the image crisis. So it was a rapid deterioration of our relations with Israel. So somebody said, Professor Jelonek is with us, so he will tell you, we are one of the 5 powers of this world. We have to tell the world how the world should behave. It shouldn't be the other way round. If we assume that Poland is a superpower, that's the assumption of the current government, but it results in a diffusion in mindsets of many Poles. If we start pretending that Poland is a superpower, it means that we can shape the foreign policy anywhere in the world. Our place, as a matter of fact, is really determined. This is not the place for a superpower. It's not even a regional superpower. So it's somewhere in between the transatlantic and EU axis. So if we manage these two elements, we will be able to have good relations in terms of this policy with Asia.
Thank you very much for your comment. Now I would like to ask the question to Joanna Ciesielska-Klikowska. Could you provide the perspective of Polish policy towards Asia from the point of view of the solutions used in Germany? Certainly. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's going to refer to what Mr. Zalewski and Professor Jelonek mentioned. I think that the approach to the Polish strategy through the perspective of Germany can be valuable, but we have to understand that Poland and Germany are not equal economic partners. This is the most important card in this game. Our potential is more limited. The foreign policy of Germany towards Asia has started in the 19th century, and it continued before and after the war. The strategy started to flourish in the 1980s and 1990s, and it was mainly developed by Helmut Kohl's government when they published Asian strategic document that widely applied to Asia as the continent. It mentioned economic issues as well as civic freedoms and rights. The development of this document resulted from many years of work and different experiences. Mr. Zalewski mentioned that the German foreign policy took into account what we still lack, namely trade relationships and the need of political milieus, but also it was taken into account what the scientific circles know and what the public opinion is expecting. This was not a moment of enlightenment, but a process that lasted through the 1960s and 1990s. There were strikes of young people 1962 through to 1968, which means it was a long-lasting process. People realized that what the scientists and what the public opinion says has to be taken into consideration. From my perspective, I can see that in the context of the whole German foreign policy, there is a clear mechanism of something that I call multidimensional cooperation. There are like such ties as public opinion and taking public opinion into account, listening to the opinions of experts representing different think tanks, then considering the comments and opinions, then the expectations of the business which invests in Asia and cooperates with Asian partners in Germany. And the fifth one is taking into account the needs of political decision makers who operate in international environment. The German strategy takes into account various opinions and various aspects. Then the policy evolved towards specific regions of the Asian continent. At the end of September, a strategy for India Pacific was announced. This region is perceived as the region of the world's future. The strategy clearly states that the Germans want to go beyond the relationships with China, though China is still the key trade partner, but they are still the competitor as far as investors and soft power is concerned. So partners should be searched for in India and Southeastern Asia. The Germans approach Asia in two dimensions as most dynamically developing region of the world and as the continent which is facing various challenges such as climate changes, access to potable water, protection of human rights and civic freedoms. The Germans treat the region and the project as opportunities and not as hazards, remembering the experience of people who live in Asia, who study Asia, taking advantage of the knowledge of think tanks and political parties. I would also like to say that the German strategy towards Asia is perfect. I would say it is well thought. The current document consists of over 70 pages. Uh, it's much more than Professor Jelonek mentioned, 7 sentences versus 70 pages. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it offers freedom to act for various partners. Lots of opportunities that can be used on the central level, but they can also be used by regional and sub-regional partners, cities, lands, and they can tackle controversial questions, which are controversial from the point of view of the whole Europe and the whole world. Thank you very much for this interesting comment. And question to Professor Kamiński, what are the opportunities for us in Asia, including the multi-level politics? It needs to take into account that we are the EU member state. And this is what conditions, what determines the policy. It is always a three-level policy, namely the European level where European institutions represent us, national policy and politics level, as well as international relations of our regions and cities. So we have to give up the tradition of perceiving foreign policy as only the operations of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The policy towards Asia is implemented in a multi-level environment. When we hear about the need to have a pivot towards Asia, we have to say that it occurred on several levels. China is a strategic partner, and it describes certain aspects of Polish policy. Poland is not running its independent policy in this respect, but it's cooperating with the European Commission. So that's the pivot. It also applies to the relations on the municipal levels. Together with Ms. Ciesielska, we are implementing a project investigating the relations between European town cities with China. We have the latest data applying to Poland. What can we read there? Out of 50 something cities with the population of over 50,000, as many as 26 cooperate with China, and for 30% of them, China is a very important partner. 14 out of 16 regions have developed network of cooperation with Chinese town cities in the area of municipal management, higher education, culture, and so on and so forth. So this pivot has already taken place. What we have to do is to recognize this fact on the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What we lack here is coordination of changes on the level of towns, cities, and regions. The Chinese know how to do it, and they try to implement the policy of their provinces into their state policy. We do have a problem with that in Poland because it is not coordinated. We asked city and town representatives whether they coordinate their actions towards China with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and in majority of cases, the answers were negative. Apart from coordination, we should be concerned about moving the Polish opinion to the European level and to conduct it in a coordinated way with the European Union and with the USA. Poland will never be an independent player in Asia, but our opinion can be important through European structures. That is why we should care for common policy. And the last sentence is that we definitely need to overcome what Professor Jelonek mentioned. Asia does not stand for China exclusively. If we go beyond China, we can take advantage of the free trade agreement with South Korea. It turned out that after this agreement was signed by the EU, such sectors China production or various fruit products such as chokeberry products have seen a big increase in the sales. Thank you very much. We talked about transatlantic relations and the European Union, and let's look to the east because we have a big neighbor there, an influential neighbor. The last question goes to Professor Agnieszka Legucka. How to include Russia in our foreign policy towards Asia? Thank you very much for other contributions to the discussion, because all of them suggest that the Polish policy towards Asia and Russia has a greater impact if it's founded within the EU or NATO. However, if we refer to what Ms. Cieślikowska mentioned, honestly speaking, I cannot share with you good practices when it comes to the Russian approach to Asia, mainly because of the aggressive policy that Russia is following. There are no such relations on the political level, and also because of the EU sanctions and counter sanctions that struck the Polish business and Polish agriculture. I would say we should not follow the guidelines as far as Russian policy is concerned, and we should not transfer it onto the relations with Asia. I am not such an expert as the previous speakers, but from my perspective, China was perceived for some time as an opportunity, and Russia was perceived as a hazard. For a few years now, as a result of the American-Chinese competition, I think that Asia is differentiated. That this is not only China, but the rest of Asia as well. The remaining part of Asia without China is still perceived as an opportunity, while the fact that China has started collaborating with Russia affected the perception of China as a challenge or hazard in some situations. In the pandemic, these aspects were highlighted in the context of disinformation, propaganda, and aspects related to the safety of the potential alliance between Russia and China. It needs to be emphasized that Asia is perceived much better in Russia than in the European Union. And the other aspect is that if we refer to the comparisons to the pivot, long time ago, Russia has been following this path um, uh, of clashing with the EU. They shifted their focus point towards China. These are asymmetrical relations, and the Russians are not capable of compensating for the economic aspects of the cooperation with China, because the EU remains the major trade partner. From the point of view of global interest, the fact that China is growing strong improves Russians' opportunity to develop a polarized world, to compete with democratic states, compete with the EU and with the USA. I think there are two possible scenarios for Poland. If we are rooted in the European Union, we have to remember that there are some aspects that do not necessarily turn out beneficial for Poland. There is a preferred narrative or a substantiation for the policy. If I'm wrong, please try to confront me. The Chinese-Russian alliance can be ruptured towards shifting the borders and towards opening the dialogue with Russia, accepting Russia as it is. I would summarize by saying that it could be business better than usual for Russia. I refer here to the business that Russia is trying to do with other countries.
So, in this negative scenario, Poland would be excluded and marginalized, and Poland would not be able to understand processes under which Russians would be distracted from China. And Russians will not change the positive attitudes towards Asia, but I can also see a positive scenario for Poland. It is connected with the winning of Joe Biden and with the change in transatlantic relations. The US policy towards Asia will not change significantly. The competitive strategy will remain. Something that will be probably changed is the means of delivering this policy and searching for contacts and cooperation with the European Union. So there will be more cooperation between the United States and European Union to open Chinese markets, to make sure that this strategy also covers transatlantic relations with China. So, in my opinion, well, this is all I wanted to say, and of course, I will answer your questions. Thank you very much. We have just completed the main part of our discussions, but we still have 10 minutes more. So we will be able to have a discussion, or maybe we can receive some questions from the audience. Do the speakers would like to ask one another? Professor Adam Jelonek, ladies and gentlemen. In general, I fully agree with the Professor Legucka, the fear in connection with Russia, the fear with attracting Russia to the European Union. We all remember about this fear, but I would like to add another fear in terms of the relations with the United States. This attraction of Russia, one of the key actor in distracting Russia from China, may be the United States led by Donald Trump. It seems that we have just got rid of this threat. As regards our Asian policy and some strategic actions. One comment from me. Our policy towards Asia was a policy that has never been rooted in a detailed strategy. It was a reactive, responsive policy. So we were always responding to some events. I would like to remind that in terms of our Asian policy, we have made so many unexpected turns towards various different countries. It often was a result of external factors, which we had no impact on. In the past, there were two moments that we used to have strategic partnership with China, for instance. We discovered that these relations were very, very cold. There was a moment that we were just about to make huge deals with India. And then it was a failure, so we approached Pakistan, and again there was no possibility of making deals with Pakistan because of the external factors. So one strategic objective, it doesn't matter that it is about the policy towards Asia, Russia or European Union. In fact, all these policies are interconnected, and they are an integral entirety. This is an entirety, and we are unable to disconnect this entirety. I wouldn't like to dominate this discussion, but I would like to mention Asia apart from China. I lived for quite a while in the Southern Asia as a lecturer and as a diplomat. To these countries, we are like a green island which undergoes dynamic development. However, when we consider two other elements of the strategy, security policy, a policy that is a kind of a deal, international deal. So to these countries, Poland is quite an exotic place. I will never forget when I was signing an agreement with the Minister of Transport for Malaysia. It was an agreement concerning the sea transport. And just before the endorsement, the minister said, why Poland is signing this agreement about the sea transport? Poland doesn't have access to the sea. It has access. Oh, okay, we are somewhere in between Russia and Germany. And this minister said, oh, it's next to Estonia. I have to interrupt your contribution because I've received two questions. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Legucka and then to Dr. Krzysztof Zalewski, and we will see whether we have some more time. Okay, thank you. Very briefly, I remember a very good report document by Professor Kamiński. It was on the paradiplomacy. I wanted to ask Mr. Kamiński, and I would like to ask Mrs. Klikowska-Ciesielska, please tell us about an example, because you are saying that there is no coordination with the central regions. Have you noticed if there is some kind of a coordination or cooperation between regions of Poland and Germany addressing China? There is no cooperation of this type. We had an interview with Joanna in the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we learned that Germans do not think that it is necessary for them. So it is something for the European Union to do, to notice the importance of these relations. If we are going to map our resources in Asia, we have to have a very broad perspective. So the initiative of the Bohm Institute to consider Polish citizens in Asia. This is an example of an action that will be beneficial to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we will know Poles living in Asia, we will know all the actors in Asia, the actors we will be able to engage in our policy towards Asia. But we have to change our way of thinking. We have to stop perceiving this policy towards Asia only as the policy of Poland itself. Poland will never be a key partner to Asia, but Poland as a member state of the European Union, well, it can contribute to success. Now I would like to ask Dr. Ciesielska for her comment. Yes, I just wanted to add that the political system of Germany is different from the Polish political system. The specific countries have more freedom to develop international relations. And the central government does not coordinate this in Germany, although they started doing it within the past 18 months, but it's just started. So there is no typical transnational cooperation towards China between Poland and Germany. We have some scientific and cultural cooperation. It's quite strong, but when we are looking at Asia or China context, there is no policy like that, so it's a gap. In our research, we often look at the triangle we call the triple helix. So the academic circles, business, political circles cooperate, and they stimulate international cooperation. So if we benefit from these three elements, from the economic, political, and scientific, academic cooperation, social cooperation, then probably it would make sense to benefit from the German experience, because Germans, specific German regions and towns and cities started the cooperation with China in 1980s. They have also cooperated with other Chinese regions, so it's almost 40 years. I would like to give the floor to Krzysztof Zalewski. I'm sorry. I wouldn't like to speak as the last speaker. Professor, you have mentioned Estonia. Estonia is quite well known. It's a smaller country than Poland. But they are known because they have developed an international brand. Every time I attend an Indian conference on digital economy, Estonian representatives are always there. So it's not the size, it's the level of activity. Thank you very much for this comment. If there are no more comments or questions, I would like to close the meetings because we've got 36 seconds left. So I do not want anyone to be stressed due to the fact that they will be the last speakers. After the meeting, we will develop a report. This report is already being developed. Then we will share it with the speakers to add these themes they wanted to cover during the discussion, or maybe some new ideas will be developed. And then this report will be available on our website by the end of the next week. Thank you very much.